Hey guys, tonight we're heading back to a time of candlelight, corsets, and catastrophically bad sleep advice. Yes, the Victorian era. You're in London, the smog is thick. The gaslights flicker like they're trying to send Morse code, and you're lying in bed absolutely wide awake again. They say it's the age of refinement and progress, but honestly, you'd trade all the lace curtains in the world for one uninterrupted night of actual sleep. But no. Your upstairs neighbor is pacing, someone's horse is making weird noises outside, and your own brain is performing a dramatic opera called Why Did I Drink That Second Cup of Afternoon Tea? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're settling in, let me know in the comments what city are you in right now, and what time is it over there. I love seeing how far this little sleepy time history club reaches. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into night's journey together. It starts with you. Somewhere in London, 1870s. Still buttoning up your nightshirt and adjusting a pillow that's mostly filled with flattened horsehair and existential dread. You've tried everything counting backward, praying, turning your pillow to the cold side, and even staring at your ceiling until it blinks back. But sleep. No sign of it. And it's not just you. Sleeplessness is basically a national pastime. Queen Victoria herself reportedly had troubled sleep, although her version of restless probably involved too many servants rustling about trying to fluff her 15-foot bed canopy. Victorian England was full of noise and light. Surprisingly modern problems, actually. Horse-drawn cabs rattled down cobbled streets long past midnight. Early factories hummed through the night, and gas lamps spilled their orangey glow into bedrooms, making everything look like an eerie still life painting. One you couldn't turn off. Doctors and thinkers of the time were very concerned about this growing insomnia issue. Some blamed modernity. Some blamed weak nerves. Others just blamed books. Seriously, reading was considered too stimulating before bed. Charles Dickens himself couldn't sleep unless he was aligned perfectly with the magnetic north. This may or may not be true. Historians still argue about that one. You, of course, have no idea which part of you is misaligned. All you know is that it's 3 a.m. and your candle stub has burned out, leaving you staring into the inky dark, wishing your brain had an off switch. Back then, there was no word for sleep hygiene. But if there had been, yours would score about a 2 out of 10. Your mattress is lumpy. Your room smells faintly of coal and cabbage. There's a framed picture of a cherub above your bed that always looks like it's judging you. And your neighbor, Miss Abernathy, has developed a charming new habit of practicing opera scales at 1 a.m. Sleep was seen less as a biological need and more like a moral achievement. If you couldn't sleep, you must have done something wrong. Were you eating too much sugar? Reading scandalous French novels? Wearing synthetic undergarments? Think about your choices, Harold. You're not Harold, but that's what people say in this town when someone's being dramatic. But you're not giving up yet. You've been collecting ideas. Dr. Osborne down the street swears by drinking boiled lettuce water before bed. The apothecary near the station sells a pinkish syrup that makes your tongue go numb and your dreams extremely interpretive. There's also something called the sleep belt, which looks suspiciously like an instrument of medieval torture but claims to support the back and promote nightly renewal of humors. You tried it once. Your humors were not renewed. They were bruised. Everywhere you look, there's a new idea being peddled. Some suggest vigorous walking in the afternoon to tire you out. Others promote total silence. One pamphlet claims that sitting in silence for 1 hour, staring at an orange, can bring profound rest. You tried that too. The orange rotted. You did not sleep. Somehow you're not alone in this twilight zone of half-awake misery. Insomnia has become fashionable, even a little glamorous. Poets, scholars, and self-declared thinkers all brag about their sleepless nights spent composing dramatic thoughts under the moonlight. There's a growing idea that sleep is for the dull, the unimaginative. You can't tell if that's inspiring or just deeply annoying. And yet, despite the moralizing, the tonics, the rigid beds, the judgmental fruit, nobody seems to be solving the core problem. Sleep is elusive, and the Victorian era, with its endless demands, poor urban planning, and obsession with health fads, might just be making things worse. Some scholars today think the rise of insomnia during this time was tied to the Industrial Revolution. More shift work, more noise, more artificial light. Others blame the strict social codes that forced people to live in constant, exhausting performance. Either way, it's late. You're exhausted. And that mattress stuffed with hay is no closer to becoming comfortable. You sigh, roll onto your side, careful not to crush the lavender sachet that was supposed to help, and resign yourself to another night of staring at shadows and pretending they're relaxing. But maybe, just maybe, one of the things you try in the coming nights will actually work. You just have to survive the next 19. It's the next night. Or maybe it's the same night and you just never managed to sleep. Time's slippery like that when you're stuck in the land of chronic tossing and turning. Tonight, you're trying something new. Or at least, new according to Victorian logic. A nice, soothing cup of tea designed specifically for bedtime. After all, tea fixes everything, doesn't it? You carefully prepare your little tray. A chipped porcelain cup, a kettle still faintly smelling of last week's fish soup as someone borrowed it, and a satchel labeled, Night Peace Elixir, gentle on the mind. The smell is earthy, like you're about to drink a small garden. Victorians were obsessed with herbal cures for sleep. They didn't really understand brain chemistry, but they were 100% confident that drinking the right combination of boiled leaves would send you gently drifting into a dreamlike state. The problem: some of those bedtime blends contained ingredients that did the exact opposite. Take valerian root, for example. Still used today, sure. But back then, dosage wasn't exactly an exact science. A little helped you sleep, a little more. Welcome to the racetrack inside your skull. Valerian was often mixed with passion flower, a poppy extract which is just a polite way of saying opium adjacent. Or even belladonna, a plant literally named beautiful lady, but capable of making you hallucinate your bed is on fire. Nice. You stir your tea cautiously. The water's turned an odd shade of beige, like someone tried to dye a sock in it and gave up halfway. Still, you're determined. You raise the cup, sip, and immediately question your life choices. It's bitter, grassy, and vaguely metallic. But you swallowed anyway, because some apothecary in a tall hat promised this would soothe the nerves. Probably the same guy who tried to sell you powdered toad for a cuff last week. The Victorians had entire cookbooks and guides devoted to medicinal teas. One popular 1862 manual, now lost to time and mildew, recommended mixing warm milk, lemon balm, and a few drops of ammonia. You assume they meant the gentle kind, hopefully. Historians still debate whether this was a misprint or an early example of wishful thinking via chemical fog. You pace your tiny bedroom while waiting for the tea to take effect. The room is lit by a candle stub. Too short to be useful, too stubborn to go out. You hear the familiar sounds outside, a coach clattering down the street, someone shouting about stolen turnips, a dog that may or may not be winning an argument with a cat. You don't feel sleepy. You feel slightly confused. Was this tea supposed to make your fingers tingle? You grab the satchel to double-check. The ingredients list is vague. Soothing herbs, the essence of calm, and something called moonflower, which you've never heard of and sounds made up. There's also a smudged line that might say Nux vomica, but you'd rather not think about it. A spoiler: Nux vomica is the source of strychnine. Great for killing rats. Less great for bedtime. You sit back on your creaky bed and close your eyes, willing yourself to relax. But the tea has done something weird. It hasn't lulled you to sleep, but instead made your thoughts more vivid. You begin to narrate your own life in your head like you're in a dramatic stage play. There he lay. Your brain whispers, "You man undone by leaves." You mentally fire your internal narrator. You try to focus on your breathing, in out, in out. But your brain keeps interrupting. What if the tea's expired? What if it never had an expiration date? What if expiration hadn't been invented yet? You open your eyes again, still awake, still painfully aware of the itchy wool blanket under your chin and the distinct sensation of having been mildly poisoned by dandelions. There were a few success stories with Victorian teas, though. Chamomile was widely trusted, even back then. Lemon balm helped some people, too, although one diary entry from 1874 notes that the drink did quiet my nerves, but also gave me hiccups that persisted well into Sunday. Unfortunately, the concept of caffeine-free wasn't quite on the radar yet. A lot of the teas, especially those mass sold in shops, included black tea leaves for color and taste, which, as you might guess, included a healthy dose of caffeine. So yes, many people drank sleep tea that worked about as well as downing an espresso and then trying to nap in a drum circle. Still no sleep. The candle flickers lower. You think about making a second cup. Maybe this time it'll work. But you also worry your liver might quit in protest. Historians have uncovered letters where people confessed to faking sleep after drinking sleep tonics just to avoid being scalded by relatives or sleep doctors. Yes, that was a thing. One woman wrote, "I lay there, eyes closed, praying that father wouldn't burst in again with another cup of that swampy stew. You can relate deeply. The truth is, Victorian insomnia cures weren't really about rest. They were about effort. You had to prove you were trying to be healthy. Drinking bad tea, lying in uncomfortable silence, enduring strong, smelling poultices on your forehead. These were like points on your moral scoreboard. The worse it tasted, the more virtuous you were. Eventually, after a night of sweating out strange herbs and possibly dreaming with your eyes open, you drift into a light duds. Not proper sleep, more like low power mode. Your body rests, but your brain is still in there, filing imaginary paperwork and overthinking things you said 3 days ago. You wake up groggy, convinced that at one point during the night you invented a new kind of bicycle in your dream. You didn't. But the memory of it stays with you for hours. You vow to skip the tea tonight, maybe try something less chemical, or more chemical. Who knows what counts anymore? Tonight you're feeling daring, experimental, possibly desperate. After the tea debacle and the brief, hallucination-adjacent nap that followed, you've decided to try something a little more hands-on. You've read in a widely circulated Victorian health manual, titled something poetic like The Temperate Sleeper's Guide to Moral Slumber, that taking a hot mustard foot bath can calm the nerves and pull the blood downward, away from the agitated brain. Yes, mustard. Not the kind you put on sandwiches, although you briefly considered it. This is powdered mustard, sold in paper packets at the apothecary next to the leeches and feminine calming salts. You're told it promotes circulation, removes bad humors, and helps your soul settle into its nightly rest cycle. That last bit makes you nervous. You boil a kettle, grab the wash basin, and pour in the water, carefully, because your ankles still remember last week's oatmeal poultice incident. Then comes the mustard powder. It turns the water an alarming shade of yellow-orange. Somewhere between caution sign and haunted squash soup, you swirl it around. It smells like spicy regret. Still, in go your feet. And it's not terrible. Warm. Kind of tingly. You sit in your wooden chair by the bed, skirt your nightgown up to the knees modestly, of course. Victorians feared nothing more than exposed shins, and wait for the soothing effect to set in. You think about the logic behind it. Victorians believed insomnia stemmed from overactive thoughts and Corbin congestion, meaning too much thinking and too much blood in your head. The foot bath was supposed to draw the blood down, thereby draining your head of its internal chaos. Whether it works or not, historians still debate. Some say it was just a distraction, something to pass the time and offer placebo comfort. Others think it genuinely helped relax muscles and lower anxiety. A few argue it was just another excuse to avoid wearing socks. You wiggle your toes in the spicy swamp and try to relax. This chapter of Victorian insomnia treatment was deeply tied to the idea of ritual. The more steps your bedtime routine had, the more likely it was to work, at least in theory. So you light your candle at exactly the right time. You wind your pocket watch 3 turns. You recite a line from Tennyson. You fluff your pillow with exactly 3 pats. It's like preparing for a nap-themed opera performance, and you are both star and audience. There were even sleep books, published to help people build the perfect nighttime ritual. The Science of Repose, 1867, suggested soaking your feet, drinking barley water, wearing unrestrictive sleepwear, and avoiding all thoughts of death, or dinner parties, which is a lot to ask at once. Your foot bath is starting to cool. Now it feels more like suspicious soup than relaxing medicine. But your feet do feel warm. That's something. You dry them off with a towel that smells faintly of mothballs and lavender, and consider that maybe, just maybe, you're on the right track tonight. But sleep doesn't come easy. You lie back in bed now with warmer feet and a mild tingling sensation up to your knees. You feel like a half-cooked dumpling. Still, your mind races. You wonder what mustard even does when absorbed through your toes. One medical journal from the era claimed it stimulates the peripheral nerves and distracts from troubling thoughts. Another recommended it as a cure for melancholia and appropriate thoughts during Lent. So whatever those were. There was also the belief that if you couldn't sleep, your body had an imbalance, not just physically but spiritually. So foot baths weren't just for nerves. They were supposed to return your entire being to somatic equilibrium. Which sounds impressive, until you realize it basically means trying to not panic while your feet smell like a hot dog stand. You think about other things people tried. Vinegar compresses, peppermint poultices, rubbing onion slices on the soles of their feet, apparently believed to draw out toxins and improve dream clarity. One woman claimed she saw her deceased cat in a dream after using onions and never slept without them again. Historians are baffled. And then there were the foot-warming bricks. Not just any bricks. Specially baked ceramic blocks heated in ovens and wrapped in flannel. They stayed warm for hours, which is impressive considering your bed retains heat about as well as a soggy biscuit. You briefly wish for one. But you also know that if you tried to make one yourself, you'd probably burn the house down. So you settle for your modest foot soak and a fresh pair of wool socks. Still not sleepy, but calmer. Maybe this is the real trick, not chasing sleep, but slowing everything down enough that your body remembers what sleep is supposed to feel like. You imagine your nerves like tiny horses pulling a carriage. Right now they're spooked, running in circles. But the warm mustard bath, that's your Victorian attempt at Rians. Eventually you fall into a shallow doze, not quite dreaming, just floating. And in that half-sleep, you imagine you're sitting in a vast, moonlit hall, surrounded by other sleepless Victorians. Everyone has mustardy feet and sleepy eyes. Someone in the corner is playing a harp made of teacups, and no one minds that you're all just waiting for sleep to finally show up. It doesn't. But for once, you don't mind the wait. Tonight you're embracing technology. Or, well, Victorian technology, which, to be honest, is mostly just regular furniture with extra knobs on it and an alarming number of gears. You're trying what the pamphlet calls a mechanical aid to gentle slumber, a term that really just means strapped springs and pulleys to something and hope for the best. The item in question, a vibrating bed frame, also known as the sleep harmonizer, patented in 1873 by an ambitious Scotsman with chronic insomnia and, evidently, access to far too much brass. The idea was simple enough: make the bed shake ever so gently like a cradle. After all, babies fall asleep that way. Why not grown-ups with too many thoughts about cold taxes and whether their monocle etiquette is up to snuff? You examine your rented contraption. It looks like a regular bed, but underneath it is a system of gears, a foot pedal, and a wind-up crank on the side. It hums faintly, like an annoyed bumblebee, as it ticks down its 20-minute session. You're supposed to crank it, lie down, and let the gentle motion lull you to sleep. Simple, right? You lie back on the mattress, press the pedal with your foot, and the frame begins to thrum softly. At first, it's kind of nice, a low, subtle vibration, like a train in the far distance or the feeling of leaning against a large purring cat. Then it gets a little stronger, and then a little more. You're suddenly aware of every loose nail in the structure. The headboard vibrates with just enough intensity to make a soft, repeating thunk against the wall. The candle flickers, your cup of water develops ripples. You half expect a dinosaur to arrive, but you're committed now. This is science, sort of. The Victorians were big fans of applying movement to health problems. If your organs weren't behaving, maybe a few strong jolts would remind them of their place. There were chairs that shook, helmets that rotated, even belts you could strap on and let whirl around your waist, supposedly to restore digestive tranquility. And they didn't. This bed was part of that lineage. A misguided but earnest attempt to treat restlessness with rhythmic motion. And to be fair, some doctors of the time did report success. One wrote in his journal that patients found the motion reminiscent of childhood carriage rides. Another said it helped regulate melancholic vapors. And one, rather bluntly, confessed that it mostly made patients bored enough to sleep. You can relate to that last one. After 10 minutes of being gently jostled like a sack of apples in a wagon, you do feel a kind of resignation. Your thoughts lose their sharp edges. The world outside, distant hooves, the occasional hoot of a night owl, someone coughing theatrically across the alley, fades into a slow, steady blur. Still, it's not all serene. The mattress creaks. Your pillow starts to migrate. You briefly worry the bed might shake itself into the hallway. But then the mechanism winds down and you're left in stillness, complete silence, which feels strange now, like the world's paused. You wonder, did it work? Well, you don't feel exactly sleepy, but there's a fog settling into your limbs, that heavy feeling behind the eyes. Not quite drowsiness, but the possibility of drowsiness, which, compared to last night's wide-eyed mustard venture, feels like progress. You shift under the blanket and recall how many strange sleep machines came out of this era. There were dream cones you could wear on your head, metal hats lined with magnets. There were music boxes with embedded hypnosis suggestions. One woman claimed her clock chimed in, a pleasing hypnotic pattern that erased all nightmares. Another man invented what he called the slumber mask, which looked suspiciously like a leather horse blindfold, but promised to block out intrusive energies. Historians are still arguing whether these devices were quackery, hopefulness, or just incredibly creative coping mechanisms. Some of them did have early insights into what we now understand about white noise, vestibular soothing, or sensory deprivation. Others were, frankly, just a way to pass the time between bouts of staring at the ceiling and sighing dramatically. You, lying there now on your bed, that once vibrated, feel somewhere in between. Your muscles are relaxed, but your brain is politely declining to power down. Still, you begin to understand something. Maybe sleep isn't a single goal, but a process. A slow series of mechanical cranks, herbal failures, warm feet, and whispered poems. Maybe the attempt itself is part of the journey. Or maybe you just shook your spine loose and your brain's confused. Either way, you're lying still, breathing slow. Not asleep, but not fighting anymore. You reach down and gently crank the bed again, just once more, for science. You've decided it's time for something more botanical, less mustard, more meadow. Tonight's remedy comes in the form of herbal pillows, also known in your current reading as scent sachets for somnolence. Victorians loved a good sachet. If it smelled like a garden and promised vaguely medicinal results, it was practically medicine. Your sachet tonight is a homemade blend: lavender, chamomile hops, and a pinch of dried rose petals. The Queen's Blend. According to the handwritten note from the local apothecary, who speaks in lowercase and never blinks, you hold it up to your nose and inhale. It smells like the kind of field you imagine lying in while someone reads you poetry and plays a harp badly in the distance. Earthy, sweet, with a hint of hayloft. You resist the urge to sneeze. You slip the sachet under your pillow, fluff it slightly, and lie down. Victorians believed scents had serious power over the body. Lavender was considered a cooling herb, good for calming the mind and reducing what they often called hysterical electricity. Chamomile, of course, was for nerves. And hops, originally used in beer, yes, but also known for their sedative effects. In fact, some doctors even recommended sleeping on a sack of hops directly. You considered that, but then pictured waking up smelling like the inside of a tavern and thought again. According to sleep manuals of the time, the ideal bedroom for rest would smell faintly of flowers, have windows cracked 1 inch for healthful air, and be absolutely free of spiritual agitation, though no one ever explained how to test for that last one. Presumably, if your wallpaper blinked at you, that was a bad sign. You close your eyes and try to focus on the smell. Deep breath in, deep breath out, and it's not bad. You feel calmer. Not asleep, but perhaps slightly less frantic about not sleeping, which is, let's face it, an achievement. As you lie there, you think about some of the more unusual ingredients used in sleep sachets. In some circles, they added dried lettuce. Yes, lettuce, because it was believed to have mild soporific qualities. One 1881 manual described lettuce as the vegetable equivalent of a lullaby. Another recommended burning rosemary at dusk while stuffing pillows with lemon balm and singing gently to your sheets. And then there's valerian root, the real heavy hitter of Victorian sleep lore. Smells terrible, works occasionally, and makes your pillow smell like pickled socks. But it was beloved by apothecaries and cats alike. One physician insisted valerian could pacify the disturbed mind and quell nocturnal fantasies, which sounds promising, though a little dramatic. Your own sachet, thankfully, avoids the stinkier herbs. It leans more toward gentle meadow than abandoned root cellar. It's pleasant enough that you start to imagine you're lying in a quiet countryside, far from the city's soot and late-night carriage clatter. There's a soft breeze. A sheep bleats somewhere philosophically. You, in your nightgown and itchy wool socks, look up at a sky filled with the stars of constellations you can't quite remember. Somewhere in the distance, a faint clink, a neighbor winding his bed crank. You breathe in again. The herbal approach to sleep wasn't just about pillows. Victorians used herbal teas, tinctures, rubs, and even scented bookmarks to help train their bodies to rest. There were sleep powders, made of crushed petals and chalk, sprinkled between bed sheets like sleepy confetti. One particularly poetic recommendation advised tying a sachet to your wrist, so that even in your most unconscious hour, your pulse knows peace. Did any of it work? Historians are, once again, divided. Some point to the calming psychological effect of scent and ritual. Others say most people just eventually passed out from exhaustion, and herbs merely softened the crash landing. A few, ever the romantics, argue that these remedies worked not because of their chemical properties, but because they reminded people that they were trying to care for themselves, even when the world was loud, even when sleep wouldn't come. You like that idea? You lie there a little longer, letting the lavender do whatever it does, and you start to notice something odd. You're not sleepy, not exactly, but you're not sleepy either. Your thoughts are quieter. They loop in soft spirals now, not jagged angles. You start to forget what time it is and realize you don't care. There's a comfort in doing something gentle, even if it doesn't have guaranteed results. Even if it's just fluffing a pillow that smells like a florist's apron and saying to yourself, I'm trying. The sachet shifts under your head slightly. You adjust. There, that's better. You begin to drift, not toward sleep exactly, but toward its cousin piece. Tonight you're making soup. Not real soup, mind you, the bubbling kind with parsnips and far too much salt. No, this is what the Victorians lovingly called a sleep broth. A warm, milky concoction spiked with just enough nonsense to make your eyelids consider the idea of cooperation. You've boiled milk in a small pan over a flickering flame, stirred in a drop of honey, a whisper of nutmeg, and, per the apothecary's instructions, exactly 3 drops of lettuce water. Yes, lettuce water. Before you panic, don't worry, you didn't mess up and make a salad smoothie. In the 19th century, it was common belief that lettuce, especially wild lettuce, had mild sedative properties. Lactucarium, they called it. Basically the milky sap you get from snapping a lettuce stalk. Apothecaries would collect this bitter goo and bottle it for anxious clients, promising dreams filled with flowers and not, say, flying tax collectors. So now you sit in your small room, cradling a warm mug, sipping something that tastes like slightly confused custard and hoping for sleep. The heat moves through you slowly. Your hands grow warm. Your shoulders drop. You try to pretend you don't notice that the milk tastes just a little too much like vegetables. Victorian sleep culture was full of beverages like this. Non-alcoholic, of course, if you were in polite society, but still designed to calm the nerves. Some were made with barley, some with chamomile infusions. Others with beef essence, which is exactly what it sounds like and should be avoided unless you enjoy sleeping with regret. One especially popular drink was milk punch, served warm with a dash of nutmeg, often described as liquid lullaby. The nutmeg was the key. It was believed to have gentle narcotic properties when used sparingly. Used generously, however, it could send you on what Victorians politely called a dreamy journey. One 1864 report described a man who drank too much nutmeg milk and wandered into a garden to speak with the moon about property taxes. You sip cautiously. Your own dose is modest, just enough to feel the warm glow. You imagine yourself in a grand old house, lace curtains swaying, a fireplace clicking quietly, and a footman somewhere in the distance boiling more milk with solemn importance. He does not smile. He takes milk very seriously. Across the ocean, similar concoctions were being brewed by people from all walks of life. In rural Scotland, they drank a hot mixture of oatmeal water and poppy seed infusion. In parts of West Africa, night drinks included baobab fruit blended with goat's milk and honey. In Qing-era China, older herbalists might prescribe a warm almond broth laced with crushed jujube. The idea was universal: warmth, sweetness, routine. And honestly, you're beginning to see the appeal. Halfway through your mug, the edges of your thoughts begin to soften. You're no longer rehearsing tomorrow's obligations or cataloging past embarrassments. Instead, your brain starts playing a quiet slideshow of oddly specific images. A cat wearing spectacles, a mossy boot left by a river, a window that refuses to close all the way. You blink slowly. The fire crackles. The milk sloshes gently as you swirl the last few sips. You drink them, wipe your mouth with the sleeve of your very fashionable yet slightly itchy dressing gown, and set the mug down. You breathe. There's something about sipping something warm in the quiet of night. It doesn't fix anything. It doesn't force sleep, but it invites your body into stillness. It says, you're allowed to stop now. And maybe that's what all these rituals are really about. Victorian cures often get mocked for being ineffective, but perhaps the point was never in the science. Perhaps the point was in the pause. The slow, careful making of something soothing, the decision to care for oneself in a small, gentle way. You yawn. Big, exaggerated, dramatic. A Victorian yawn, if such a thing existed, maybe with a monocle nearly falling out. You lie back. Full belly, warm chest, sleepy fingers. And for a moment, you wonder if your ancestors also lay in small, creaky beds, sipping odd broths and willing their minds to hush. Probably. Everyone everywhere, just trying to sleep. The milk weirdly helps. Tonight, you find yourself pacing. Not anxiously. Just the sort of slow slipper, shuffling wander one does when the bed isn't cooperating and the floorboards seem friendlier. You've decided to try a Victorian sleep exercise. Now, don't worry. There's no lunging involved. No crunches. Just a peculiar set of calming activities designed in the 1800s to gently tire the body, confuse the brain, and convince the nerves that everything is under control. The name of tonight's technique, perambulatory rest inducement, which, when translated into less dramatic terms, means go walk around the room like a ghost with taxes due. The idea was this: if your brain wouldn't stop worrying, move your body just enough to give it something dull to focus on. Think of it like walking a stubborn dog made of anxiety. You don't want to run. You don't want to stop. You just keep moving, quietly, methodically, like you're inspecting a house you forgot you owned. Victorian manuals recommended anywhere between 30 and 100 gentle steps, taken slowly, with intentional breathing. If you were lucky enough to live in a house with a long hallway, even better. Let your feet echo in rhythm, one doctor wrote, until your mind grows wary of thinking. You try it now. Right foot. A slow turn at the door. Back again. You pass the bed. It looks skeptical. You nod politely and keep going. Some Victorians even had crest corridors, short walkways attached to the bedroom, decorated with soft rugs and faint gaslight, designed specifically for this kind of midnight wandering. The goal wasn't to break a sweat. It was to give your thoughts something bland to chew on while the rest of you quieted down. You imagine your own rest corridor. It has fern wallpaper, a single rocking chair, maybe a portrait of a distant aunt who disapproves of slippers. After 10 or so laps, you add a stretch or two. Nothing fancy, just the classic Victorian shoulder roll and a neck drift, which sounds like a jazz move, but is really just slowly tilting your head from side to side and trying not to pull anything. You feel a little ridiculous, which is perfect, because mild embarrassment is very grounding. Victorian sleep exercises weren't all walking and wobbling. There were also breathing postures, often done while seated on the edge of the bed. One such exercise, the fourfold inhale, went like this. Inhale slowly through your nose for 4 seconds, hold it for 4, exhale for 4. Then sigh dramatically, as if you've just read something upsetting in the newspaper. And that last part wasn't officially included, but it was heavily implied. This kind of structured breathing shows up in many cultures across history. In yogic traditions, it's pranayama. In Taoist texts, it's breath control for balancing ki. Even ancient Roman philosophers recommended deep sighing as a cure for melancholic unrest, which, frankly, sounds like the exact mood of someone sleepwalking in a corset. You sit on the edge of your bed now and try it. Inhale. 3. 4. Hold. Exhale. 2, 3, 4. Then sigh, because it's Tuesday and you don't know why you own so many socks. The science behind this, yes, there is some modern science, suggests that breathing exercises help engage the parasympathetic nervous system, the crest and digest mode of your body. Victorian thinkers didn't use those terms, but they understood intuitively that a calm body could coax a calm mind. After a few rounds of breathing, you feel the shift. Less chaos in the skull, more space. Your thoughts get quieter, like a party that's finally starting to wind down. You picture your thoughts putting on little hats and saying, "Well, it's been lovely, but I suppose we should go." You lie back down, feet warm, arms heavy, neck pleasantly rubbery. The clock ticks. Somewhere outside, a night owl calls out, perhaps also trying their 3rd round of lettuce milk. You think about how lovely it is that even when sleep doesn't come easily, there are still things you can do, little routines, little movements, not to force sleep, but to greet it when it arrives. You turn to your side and imagine your hallway, the quiet steps, the wallpaper, that portrait of your frowning aunt. Even she looks sleepy now. Tonight you're doing a little light redecorating, not out of ambition or aesthetics, just curiosity. Because if the Victorians believed one thing almost as strongly as the power of warm milk, it was that the layout of your bedroom could either lure you to sleep or ruin you forever. You start by examining your bed. According to 19th century manuals, its orientation was of vital importance. North to south was ideal. East to west? Absolutely not. Well, no one could agree. Some said it was magnetism. Others blamed nerve vibrations. One enthusiastic doctor insisted the Earth's rotation could shake dreams loose if you weren't aligned with its pull. So, naturally, you drag your bed slightly northward. It's unclear if it actually helped or if now your room just smells like disturbed carpet dust. Either way, you're committed. Then comes the color theory. Victorians were big believers in the emotional power of color. Not in a Pinterest board kind of way, but in a medical way. Blue, calming, soothing. Red, dangerous, absolutely not for sleeping. Red was for drawing rooms, debates, and accidentally inflaming the liver. So, if your room is painted anything other than a pale pastel, you're now contemplating a midnight repaint. Or at least draping a shawl over the louder corners. You look around. There's a chair in the corner. That's good. Victorian sleep doctors recommended keeping a chair beside the bed, preferably with a worn-out cushion and slightly creaky legs. It wasn't for sitting necessarily. It was for comfort by association. A restful chair, one pamphlet read, reminds the mind of idle hours and gives the body permission to rest. So you set a chair there, not approvingly, and immediately put a book on it you will never finish. Next, you tackle ventilation. Here's where things get interesting. In the early 1800s, many believed that night air was dangerous. Not metaphorically. Literally poisonous. People shut their windows tight, stuffed rags into doorframes, and sometimes even wore special sleeping masks to protect themselves from miasmas. So that's the old-timey word for bad air that might turn you weird. But by mid-century, a new camp rose of the fresh air fanatics. These folks believed that a nightly breeze was not just helpful, it was necessary. They opened every window, even in winter, wore knitted sleeping hats, and praised the cleansing power of a crisp, cold draft. You being adventurous, open the window a crack. Immediately, a moth flies in. It bumps into the wall like it forgot how wings work, then settles on the curtain with the confidence of a tax auditor. Still, the air is nice. Crisp. You leave it open. Then there's the question of objects in the room. Victorians had rules for everything. Clocks should tick softly or not at all. Mirrors must be covered after dark, something about reflections confusing the spirit or just making your insomnia look worse. No strong perfumes. No plants that bloomed at night. And certainly no pictures of stern ancestors watching you from the wallpaper. You scan the room. A poster with vaguely motivational words. Acceptable, efficacious, suspicious. You move it slightly out of view just in case it starts blooming aggressively. But the most important element, the bedclothes. Victorian sleep experts believed the very texture of your bedding could affect dreams. Too coarse, your mind becomes agitated. Too soft, your soul drifts too far and forgets to come back. And not everyone agreed with that last part, but it does make for a good bedtime story. The solution was moderate plushness. That's right. Not luxury, not austerity. Something in between. A mattress firm enough to support but not so firm that you feel judged by it. A pillow that welcomes your head like an understanding friend. Not too lofty, not too flat. You fluff your own pillow. It emits a small, pitiful puff of old feathers. Good enough. Finally, there's the matter of sound. Victorians had no white noise machines, but they did have equivalents. Soft ticking clocks, faint wind chimes, or the gentle bubbling of a ceramic water fountain. In some houses, nurses were instructed to hum low, repetitive tunes near sleeping children. An early form of sleep podcast, perhaps. You imagine a servant outside your door now, humming softly. Not a tune you recognize, just a loop of vowels and warmth, comforting, if slightly awkward. Everything is ready. The bed faces north. The window breathes. The moth seems to have made peace with the curtain. The air smells like lavender and old paint. Your pillow accepts you like a slightly disappointed but loving grandmother. And even though none of this is proven to work, even though science has since moved past many of these claims, you feel better. You feel tucked into history. Sometimes, the ritual is the cure. Tonight, you're brushing your teeth. Or, at least, pretending to. Because if you're going to fully immerse yourself in the Victorian sleep experience, oral hygiene deserves its own chapter. Not for the minty freshness, no. For the deeply held 19th century belief that what happened in your mouth could determine the quality of your dreams. So let's talk pre-sleep rituals, Victorian style. You've already realigned your bed, banished the ficus, and opened a moth-sized gap in the window. Now, you're heading into the tiny corner of the house they generously called the washroom. It's not much more than a jug of water, a bowl, and a slightly judgmental hand towel. Victorian bedtime routines were full of symbolism. Cleans the face, cleans the mind. Scrub the hands, scrub the day away. Gargle something vaguely medicinal, and you might just keep nightmares at bay. You pick up the toothbrush. If you're imagining soft nylon bristles, please pause. Victorian toothbrushes were made with boar hair, sometimes horse hair. Sometimes, in a tragic twist of overconfidence, wire. The handles were often carved from bone or wood, and they had all the ergonomic grace of a paint stirrer. You dip the brush into a mix of chalk, soap, and burnt eggshell, because Victorian toothpaste was essentially artisanal sidewalk dust, and then you scrub, gently, because you value your enamel and have seen at least one modern dentist in your life. There's a strange comfort in it, though. This nightly rhythm. The same motion your great-great-great-grandmother might have done, standing in a candlelit room, thinking about what bonnet to wear tomorrow. After your brush, you rinse. Victorians loved a good mouth rinse, often involving baking soda, vinegar, or herbal infusions like chamomile and sage water. They believed a calm mouth led to a calm stomach, and a calm stomach meant your humors wouldn't boil over in your sleep. That was the goal, keep the bodily spirits from staging a midnight opera. Now clean, you sit at your vanity or basin stand and begin the next phase of face washing. Victorian face washing was less about skincare and more about temperature management. You were supposed to use cool, not cold water in summer and warm hot water in winter. Too extreme, and it was believed your skin would shock the nerves and cogitate the heart, a reaction some of us still have to freezing water at 6 a.m. Doctors of the day also suggested washing the back of the neck, the temples, and, oddly specific, the hollows behind your ears. It was believed that doing so relaxed the base of thought, which sounds poetic until you realize it was mostly just a polite way of saying, please don't go to bed filthy. You towel off, looking appropriately luminous. Then comes what may be your new favorite part, the hair ritual. Even if you don't have long Victorian curls cascading down your shoulders, the idea still stands. Before sleep, one was expected to brush the hair 100 times. Not because it did anything particularly useful, but because the repetition, the soft motion, was believed to lull both mind and body into submission, and so you sit and brush. 1, 2, maybe skip to 30, 40. The motion is almost hypnotic. The sound of bristles through hair, the faint rustle of fabric. Somewhere in the distance, a carriage rattles by on cobblestone. You're not in 2025 anymore. You're in London, or maybe York, or a little farmhouse on the edge of Norfolk. The lamp flickers. Your reflection blinks slowly in the mirror. It's just you, your thoughts, and a strong scent of lavender water. Speaking of which, aromatics. Victorians were huge believers in the power of scent. Lavender, rose, marjoram, orange blossom. Anything vaguely botanical was fair game. You were meant to dab a bit behind each ear, perhaps on your wrists. Not too much. Just enough to perfume the dream, said one poet. Some wealthier folks even had pillow sachets, small linen bags filled with dried herbs and flowers, tucked under the pillow or pinned to nightcaps. Yes, nightcaps were a thing. We'll get there, just wait. You hold a sachet now, one filled with crushed hops, chamomile, and valerian root. It smells like someone's tea drawer fell into a dusty library. In the best way. Your eyelids feel heavier, maybe from the lavender, maybe from all that brushing, maybe from the deep spiritual exhaustion of living in a century without proper mattresses. You stand, you stretch. One last part remains, the bedtime prayer or reflection. Now, whether you're religious or not, the principle here is simple. Before sleep, you pause. You review the day, not in judgment, but as a way of placing it gently on a shelf. Let each hour be laid down like folded linen, one diary entry said, so that the soul may walk uncluttered into dreams. So, you sit on the bed, or maybe just stand near the window, and you think today happened. It's over now. You did your best, or maybe just survived. Either way, that's enough. And then the room stills. The brush is set aside. The towel dries slowly on its hook. Outside, the moth resumes its mission. You climb into bed, now fully prepared. Victorian sleep didn't always work, but it was rarely rushed. And somehow tonight, neither are you. Tonight, you're not just going to bed. You're getting dressed for the occasion, which in the Victorian era was a far more involved process than most modern people can imagine. Because while you might throw on an oversized hoodie or curl up in yesterday's pajamas, the Victorians treated bedtime attire like an act of serious personal ritual. First, the nightshirt. You slide it over your head. Its billowy reaches your shines, and has more buttons than strictly necessary. Made of cotton or flannel, depending on the season, it's both modest and mildly itchy. Some were embroidered at the collar, just in case someone happened to die in their sleep and needed to look nice for the undertaker. Because yes, death during sleep was a real concern, especially in an age of mysterious ailments, unventilated bedrooms, and unpredictable fire hazards. It was not uncommon for someone to have going-to-bed clothes that also doubled as, just in case it clothes. Next comes the nightcap. Now you've seen the illustrations. A long, droopy cone of fabric that looks like a deflated party hat. And yes, it was exactly that. Nightcaps were designed to keep the head warm in drafty homes, but some also believed they prevented nightmares by shielding the crown chakra, or containing stray thoughts. Science has moved on. But the cap? Still charming. You pull it on, immediately you feel 60% more like a Dickens character and 40% more like you're about to read your own will. But it's cozy, and strangely dignified. For women, sleepwear was even more elaborate. Lace-trimmed gowns, modesty panels, and occasionally even a corset loosened, but not removed. For health, one Victorian sleep manual advised ladies to maintain shape through repose, which feels like a polite way it's off from waste management. No heavy dress elf in a robe or you wrap your so gown if you're a knife saying known if you're rhine if you're upper class, or maybe just a well-worn shawl if not. You glance at yourself in the mirror. You look like you're about to solve a mystery, or faint gently onto a chaise lounge. Either way, you're ready, but here's where it gets more peculiar. Victorians love bedside accessories, not gadgets, not phones, but little comforting objects that were believed to support rest. You check your side table. Is there a hot brick wrapped in cloth at your feet? That's not just quirky, it was standard. Many homes lacked central heating, so sleepers warmed bricks or ceramic pigs, bed pigs, in the hearth, then tucked them under the sheets. The warmth lasted just long enough to fall asleep before hypothermia kicked in. You shift slightly and imagine the warm pressure at your toes. Not unpleasant. Next, a bed curtain. Victorian beds were often surrounded by heavy draperies, not for privacy, but to trap body heat and keep out night vapors. You imagine pulling yours closed and the outside world disappearing in velvet folds. Cozy. A little claustrophobic, but cozy. You notice the shelf above your bed. A small bottle of something. Victorian medicine, perhaps. They were quite fond of sleep tinctures. Herbal mixes with names like Dar, Smiley Soothing Syrup, or Elixir of Restful Nerves. These concoctions often contained ingredients we now find concerning. Opium, alcohol, chloroform, and cannabis extracts weren't uncommon. The bottles were ornate. The side effects, less so. You pick one up. Read the label. For nightly unrest and frantic dreamings. Administer 1 spoonful, or 2 if dreadfully agitated. Ah, charming. You do not, of course, drink it. You set it down with the same respect one gives a cursed object. Instead, you opt for a cup of warm milk. A timeless classic. Victorian doctors praised milk for its gentle dulling properties. Some added nutmeg or cinnamon. A few daring souls added lettuce water. Yes, steeped lettuce to induce sleep. It was thought to contain a mild sedative compound. It mostly just tasted like soup without purpose. You sip. It's fine. Now into bed. Again, you slide under the covers. The heavy wool blanket weighs like a second mortgage. The sheets are crisp, maybe a little too crisp, but that's part of the charm. Before sleep, a few people might write in a dream diary, or record their emotional humors of the day. You reach for yours. A leather-bound book filled with loose ink and more doodles than insights. Still, it's comforting. To put pen to paper, to let thoughts flow like the last trickle of candle wax. You jot. Felt mildly irritable today. Thought about butter for 23 minutes. Heard the neighbor's goose again. You pause. Close the book, blow out the candle. The flame flickers. Shadows pull upward like sleepy ghosts. The room cools. Your breathing slows. And in this strange, elaborate costume, surrounded by sleep relics and medical myths, you realize something the Victorians were trying to understand rest. Trying to control the uncontrollable. Trying to find peace in a world that offered very little of it. And now, dressed in their dreams and doubts, you drift off, half in history, half in sleep. You're asleep. Or almost. That strange state between the real and the dreamlike, where your body is still and your mind floats like fog over a field. And then, a thud, a rustle, a faint squeak. You open one eye. Welcome to the Victorian night noises. An unofficial soundtrack that was as much a part of bedtime as the mattress itself. Tonight, you discover that sleep, in the 19th century, wasn't a silent affair. In fact, it was often an acoustic obstacle course. Let's start with the house itself. You're lying on a wooden frame, resting on a floor that creaks like it's composing a symphony of groans. The ceiling above you pops as it cools from the day's heat. Wind whistles through imperfectly sealed windows, and if you're really lucky, the chimney breathes out a hollow sigh. That's not a ghost. Probably. You hear the walls settle. The bed frame shudders when you roll over, and every so often, a mouse performs a full rehearsal for Phantom of the Opera in the pantry. But here's the real fun: the neighbors. Victorian houses, especially in cities, were built close together, and insulation was more of a concept than a reality. So tonight, you get an accidental sound tour of your block. Downstairs, someone coughs. That rattling phlegmy, deeply Victorian cough, the kind that implies a novel will start with your character dying of it. Next door, a baby wails. The kind of wail that makes you question everything about the human throat. Farther down, a dog barks. It's unclear what it's barking at. Maybe the wind. Maybe a shadow. Maybe existential dread. The Victorians would have nodded solemnly and said, "The West, the hound senses unease." You adjust your pillow. Now, if you lived in a wealthier home, you'd also hear the servants' quarters. Maids rising early, or still putting away dishes. a butler snoring softly, maybe even someone sneaking down to finish the cold roast chicken. If you lived in a more modest house, you'd be sharing a room, maybe a bed, with familings, a cousin, a goat. Not always, but not rarely either. Personal space was a luxury. This brings us to one of the most charming or horrifying features of Victorian sleep, co-sleeping. Especially in working-class homes, beds were shared, not just by couples, but by entire families. You, your two brothers, and Aunt Edith might all be tucked in like sardines, the only separation being a shared agreement to not kick each other. And so, while you're trying to sleep, you hear someone breathing heavily, someone breathing too quietly, someone definitely grinding their teeth, someone whispering prayers to themselves, and one person who insists on sleep, talking in full sentences, like they're rehearsing a courtroom monologue. Victorian households didn't have fans or white noise machines, but they had their own version, tick-tock therapy. Clocks were everywhere. Mantel clocks, pocket watches, wall pendulums. The sound of a ticking clock was constant, reassuring in its own relentless way. You count tick, tick, tick. Historians think this was one of the few consistent sounds people actually found soothing. That rhythmic tick was a reminder that time was passing, slowly and steadily. Even if you weren't sleeping, it gave you permission to just lie there. Outside, the world continues its ambient opera. You hear the clatter of a night watchman's boots, his lantern swinging with each step. He occasionally calls out the hour, 2 o'clock, and all's well. You believe him. Sort of. Farther still, a street vendor with a heavy cart heads home after a long day, his wheels rumbling like distant thunder over the cobblestones. Then there's the rain. It begins softly, barely audible, a gentle patter on the slate roof, no gutters to mute it, just the direct conversation between sky and slate. A comfort, even now. You snuggle deeper under your scratchy, heavy blanket. The sounds rise and fall. They form a strange lullaby, unintentional and imperfect, but oddly human. But of course, some sounds weren't so soothing. You might hear a scream, not a blood-curdling one, more like someone yelling, "Thief," at the top of their lungs in the distance. In Victorian cities, that was still a fairly common alarm system. The neighborhood dogs answer. Somewhere, someone shouts back. Eventually, it all goes quiet again. Scholars argue about just how well people actually slept in this era. Diaries suggest many were frequently restless, often interrupted by both external noises and internal discomforts. The lack of central heating, the questionable bedding, and the close proximity to others made deep sleep a challenge. Yet, curiously, they expected to wake during the night. That's right. Segmented sleep was a thing. Many Victorians assumed it was normal to wake around 2 or 3 a.m., sit up, maybe write a letter, read scripture, or have a snack, and then return to sleep. Some even planned their routines around it. The idea of a solid 8 hours straight would have sounded ambitious, almost arrogant. So maybe tonight, in the spirit of that tradition, you wake up too. You sit up in bed, you listen, you reflect. Then, like countless sleepers before you, you lay back down. The clock ticks, the wind shifts, and your body, slowly and quietly, slips back toward dreaming. You're still in bed, the room is still dim. But tonight you're feeling adventurous. Not in the "let's go to a party" kind of way. No, in the "let's try something questionable to fall asleep faster" kind of way. Which, for the Victorians, was practically a national sport. Welcome to the strange, often questionable world of Victorian sleep experiments, where every cupboard and kitchen shelf hid some mysterious concoction that someone's grandmother swore worked every time. You glance over at your little wooden nightstand. It's got a drawer filled with options. Some more herbal, others a little more Victorian in their boldness. Let's start with the gentlest, herbal sachets. Tonight you pick up a small muslin bag filled with lavender, chamomile, and hops. Yes, the same hops used in beer. Victorians often tucked these into their pillowcases. The theory: these plants gave off a soothing vapor that relaxed the nerves. Science now suggests there's something to it, but mostly it just smells like your pillow is trying to start a tea business. You breathe in, it's pleasant. You try to relax. But let's say that doesn't work. Next up, the onion method. Yes, onion. A respected 19th century home remedy book recommended placing a freshly cut onion on your nightstand, claiming its natural sedative properties could help induce deep sleep. You do it. Instantly, the room smells like a deli. You're uncertain if you're supposed to sleep or order pastrami on rye. Still, in the name of history, you persist. Victorian housewives also sometimes boiled lettuce water. Yes, the same sad salad ingredient, because they believed lettuce had sedative alkaloids. You sip a warm mug of it, pretending it's soothing and not just what soup dreams about when it has an identity crisis. Now let's get weirder, electric belts. In the late 1800s, as electricity became a household fascination, enterprising inventors created electromagnetic sleep aids. These included belts, caps, and bed pads wired with low-level currents, supposedly to stimulate the nervous system into restful compliance. The results? Mostly confusion and a slight tingling sensation, and the occasional case of waking up with your hair slightly more vertical than before. You eye one hanging on a hook, you consider it, then you decide your nerves are stimulated enough, thank you. How about spirit-based tonics? Ah yes, the sleeping draughts. These were liquid mixtures usually taken by the spoonful before bed. Most common ingredients included laudanum, opium, alcohol, chloral hydrate, and sometimes ether. And yes, they worked in the sense that they knocked you out. The problem was the whole, long-term consequences thing, like addiction, or not waking up. Still, in small doses, many Victorians swore by it. You read the label, Dr. Fennell's Nightly Repose Elixir, for nervous excitability, restless limbs, and unspiritual thoughts. 1 dose, it says, unless feeling particularly unspiritual. Of course you don't drink it. But you imagine someone might have. A banker after a long day. A housemaid with sore feet. A poet who couldn't stop thinking about fog and mortality. And there were pills too. Dormilene, quiet tabs, and Huschlitz. All advertised in elegant script with pictures of peaceful ladies reclining on crescent moons. What a time to be unconscious. Now, not everyone trusted the chemical route. Some preferred rituals, one popular technique. Warming the feet in mustard water before bed. You're not sure where the idea came from, but many believed warming the extremities drew nervous energy downward, letting the brain rest. Others dipped their hands in vinegar, or tied raw potato slices to the soles of their feet, because, apparently, potatoes were considered emotionally absorbent. You try to picture it, under layers of wool, your feet faintly smelling of salad dressing. You've made worse decisions. Still can't sleep. Time for mechanical solutions. The Victorian inventors, as always, rose to the challenge. One of the strangest, the sleeping helmet, a leather or metal contraption worn over the head, filled with lead or sand, designed to force the head into stillness. The theory was that motionless heads, motionless thoughts. It mostly resulted in neck pain and deeply confused spouses. Or the somnambulist stool, a bizarre chair meant to rock slowly through the night, cradling the sleeper like an adult in Timiat. Few survived more than 2 hours on it without deciding to become fully nocturnal. And for those who believed in cosmic alignment, there was the practice of positioning your bed north-south to align your body with Earth's magnetic field. The Victorians didn't fully understand what this meant, but they were very confident it worked. So tonight you drag your bed 2 inches counterclockwise. For the vibes. What's most fascinating, though, is how varied these methods were. Rich and poor, urban and rural, everyone seemed to have their own secret trick. Sleep, even then, was deeply personal, deeply human. Even the Victorians, who lived in a world powered by gaslight, soot, and superstition, shared this same nightly ritual, trying to quiet the mind, trying to calm the body, trying to drift into that elusive thing we all crave and never quite control. You pull the covers closer. The onion still lingers faintly. The herbal sachet is warm now, pressed under your chin. The clock ticks on. And in a world full of wildly different methods, you close your eyes and trust in one more as simply being still. You're not quite sure what time it is now, but your Victorian bedroom is quieter than ever. The onion's power has faded and the hops are losing their edge. So tonight, let's try something else, something with a little more movement. Tonight you're going for a walk. Not a literal one. You stay wrapped in your blanket burrito. But imagine this, you're in London. It's foggy, as always. The air smells faintly of coal, damp wool, and wet cobblestone. You pull your shawl tighter and step outside. Not for exercise, but for a time-honored Victorian remedy, the moonlit stroll. Yes, Victorians believed that a gentle nighttime walk, particularly under the moon, could restore balance to the nerves, settle an overexcited mind, and ease digestion, which was weirdly blamed for everything back then. If you couldn't sleep, the doctor's first prescription might not be a pill, but walk it off, dear. Of course, walking at night in Victorian London wasn't quite a peaceful experience. You'd pass horse-drawn carriages clattering past, hear a distant steam engine hissing, and dodge an occasional puddle that you sincerely hope is just rainwater. Still, for the average insomniac, it beat lying in bed staring at the flickering gaslight. You make your way to Hyde Park, where you're definitely not alone. Insomniacs, amateur poets, and a surprising number of hat-wearing dogs populate the scene. And as you walk, let's talk about nighttime superstitions. Because if there's one thing Victorians loved more than sleep remedies, it was finding reasons they couldn't sleep. And often, the blame landed on the supernatural. Woke up at 3 a.m. Must be a restless spirit. Bad dreams, probably witches. Couldn't fall asleep for 3 days. Definitely a curse from a scorned neighbor. Or possibly indigestion. But probably the curse. Many Victorians kept charms under their pillows, from iron nails to dried rosemary sprigs to ward off evil influences. One popular charm was a small pouch containing sea salt, lavender, and a single coin, meant to protect both your dreams and your finances. And if you heard strange noises in the night, well, it could be rats, or a banshee, depending on your level of drama. Some people went as far as consulting dream interpreters, who claimed that recurring insomnia was a message from the other realm. You were expected to decode your dreams like ancient scrolls. Dreaming of a cat, betrayal, a staircase, ambition, a broken teacup, time to change careers apparently. Of course, not everyone bought into the mysticism. Enter the Victorian rationalists, people who believed all this midnight madness had logical explanations. One popular theory, that nightmares and sleeplessness were caused by lying too flat. Yes, the solution was simply propping yourself up on more pillows, preferably 3 or 4 or however many created the illusion of a minor landslide behind your head. Meanwhile, some doctors claimed that your sleep problems were due to your mattress's magnetic pull being misaligned. One pamphlet even suggested rotating your bed weekly to equalize gravitational influence. But it's hard not to admire the creativity. You walk past a small boarding house where lights are still on in several windows. People are awake. Some are reading by gaslight. One elderly gentleman is playing a violin very badly. Another seems to be staring out the window, doing his best impression of a tragic oil painting. And you realize something strangely comforting, they're all doing it too. Trying to sleep. Failing, trying again. Now, back in your Victorian bedroom, you consider another trick: repeating simple phrases. Victorians were fond of monotonous verse, a sort of self-hypnosis, where you'd repeat calming lines over and over to lull yourself into a trance. You whisper to yourself, "Soft fall the shadows, still lies the bed. The day is over. Dreams lie ahead, it's not bad." You try again. Slower. Many believed this worked because it overloaded the conscious mind, forcing it to give up and retreat into dreams. Modern science might call it distraction. Either way, you find yourself drifting. But just as you're almost there, sleep's front porch, so to speak, you remember something important: your teeth. Yes, brace yourself. One overlooked cause of insomnia, Victorians believed, was tooth nerve excitement. If your molars were acting up, it could radiate tension into your entire nervous system, making rest impossible. Some even swore that sleeping with a clove between your back teeth could calm the nerves. You pop one in. It's spicy and confusing, but you feel very historically accurate. And if the clove doesn't work, you could try mouth taping, an old folk practice where one gently tied a soft cloth under the chin to prevent anxious mumbling and keep the soul inside the mouth. No one really knew what that meant, but it sounded poetic enough to try. Finally, let's not forget sound therapy. While modern sleep apps offer rainforest ambience or space cabin white noise, Victorians had their own version: clock ticking. A steady, rhythmic ticking was believed to soothe the nerves, so much so that some people bought ticking boxes. Little devices that produced a regular mechanical click, like a metronome just for sleep. You listen to your own wall clock now. Tick, tick, tick. Each sound is a little tug on your eyelids. You shift under your covers. Your feet now warm and tingling slightly from the mustard soak you tried earlier. You're full of odd herbs, vague electrical suggestions, and Victorian hope. And here's the oddest thing: somehow, some way you're actually a little sleepy. You think, maybe I would have survived the 1800s. Or maybe I would have invented better pillows. Either way, the walk is over. The fog has lifted. Time to let the dreams begin. You're lying there somewhere between consciousness and dreams when you hear a tiny rattle. Not quite a knock. Not quite a creak. It's rhythmic. A sound from your nightstand. Don't panic. It's not a ghost. It's your Victorian bedside remedy cabinet, and it's time to try sleep powders, pills, and potions. Tonight, we're going full apothecary. Your eyes flutter open. In front of you is a wooden box filled with neatly labeled vials, a tiny silver spoon, and a faint smell of something between cinnamon and burnt rubber. You sit up again and select a bottle. The label reads, bromide of potassium, 1 teaspoon nightly. Avoid excitement. You nod sagely, because of course avoiding excitement is easy when you're being prescribed sedatives made from potassium salts. Back in the 19th century, Bromides were considered a revolutionary treatment for everything from insomnia to epilepsy. Taken in small doses, they were supposed to calm the nerves and slow down the overactive Victorian brain. But here's the thing. Bromide didn't just make people sleepy. It made them very sleepy, like walk into a wall, forget your own address sleepy. Over time, users developed something called bromism, a delightful condition that made people sluggish, confused, and covered in a weird skin rash. Charming. You place the bottle back and reach for another. Chloral hydrate. Use only if hopeless. Chloral hydrate. The original knockout drops. Invented in the mid-1800s, this compound was often added to warm milk or whiskey and given to the restless elite. It worked so well that it quickly became the era's go-to sedative and, unfortunately, a popular substance of abuse. Charles Dickens reportedly used it. So did many poets, artists, and people with too much time and too many thoughts. At 2 a.m., you hold the vial up to the candlelight, just admiring the way the liquid swirls. Then you put it down, because frankly you don't trust it. Instead you pick something milder. Dover's powder, a classic. This popular mixture contained opium, ipecac vomit inducer, and sugar. Yes, sugar. Because even in the 1800s, people understood that if you're going to knock someone out, you might as well sweeten the deal. The theory was that the ipecac would offset the opium's constipation effects. That's right. Victorian medicine was basically one big chemistry tug of war. You sniff the powder. It smells vaguely like despair. Back into the cabinet it goes. Let's try something herbal. You find a little sachet labeled valerian root for the sleepless and soul-weary. Now this one sounds poetic. Valerian has been used since ancient times to promote calm and relaxation. The Victorian households often kept dried valerian in tea form, or even just sprinkled it under the mattress for ambient effect. You boil water, add a pinch, and sip the resulting potion. It tastes like something a wizard might brew by accident. Still, you kind of like it. Now while we're sipping strange teas, let's talk about a curious obsession in the Victorian world: tonics. Every respectable Victorian home had at least a few bottles of patent tonics, usually with dramatic names like Dr. Rilot's Elixir for Nocturnal Disquiet or Madame Faith's Dream Harmonizer. What did these contain? Often alcohol, sometimes opium, occasionally cocaine, and always a lot of sugar. One 1883 had bragged that its sleep tonic worked in less than 14 minutes and soothed both commoners and colicky infants alike, which is impressive and slightly terrifying. There was Mrs. Winslow's Soothing Syrup, a widely marketed solution for both insomnia and teething babies. It contained morphine. Yes, morphine. For babies. And let's not forget Godfrey's Cordial, another popular syrup laced with opiates, and often given to fussy children when parents just needed a break. The 19th century was basically one big chemical experiment, but not everyone trusted these potions. By the late 1800s, a small but growing number of doctors began warning about nervous system fatigue caused by long-term reliance on sedatives. Some suggested instead using moral soothing, which meant calming a patient through comforting words, soft voices, and telling them everything was fine even when it clearly wasn't. You know, the Victorian version of, "You're okay, just breathe." Others turned to galvanic therapy again. This time, not with weird headbands, but with tonics infused with magnetic currents. These were sold as liquid electricity and promised to recharge your aura. No one knew what that meant, but they sold like warm scones. Back in your candlelit room, you're now holding a very tiny spoon of something called Hoffman's anodyne. It's a mix of ether and alcohol. You blink, you put it back. Maybe that one's for another night. You lie down again. Now, here's a curious fact: the term sleep hygiene wasn't coined until the 20th century, but Victorians practiced their own form of it. They called it retiring ritual. This meant having a bedtime routine, complete with robe, slippers, and a sequence of actions that helped convince the brain it was time to stop overthinking whether or not you were dying of ghost poisoning. Your own retiring ritual might include brushing your hair 100 times, which was actually a thing, drinking a warm cordial, checking under the bed for scorpions, don't ask, and reading a chapter from a moral novel. Something slow, wholesome, and guaranteed not to excite you. You pick up your book. It's titled An Account of Agricultural Improvements in East Anglia, Volume 2. Perfect. You manage half a page before your eyelids betray you. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings. You realize with a yawn that many Victorians never expected a full night of sleep. The concept of segmented sleep was normal. People went to bed around 9 p.m., woke up around 1 a.m., did a little reading or journaling, then went back to bed until dawn. So if you're awake right now, even after all the teas, powders, and questionable syrups. You're still on brand. And maybe that's okay. Let your thoughts slow. Let the herbal warmth swirl through your chest. Let your soul, weary bones, settle into the mattress like you've finally found the right chapter in the right book on the right night. Sleep isn't something you chase. It's something that finds you. Eventually. You're not sure what time it is, but the candle has burned halfway down, and your room smells faintly like Valerian old books, and maybe, just maybe, hope. You stretch your toes under the blanket. You've tried powders, potions, and even your best attempt at a retiring ritual. But there's one Victorian remedy you haven't explored yet: the power of sound. No, not well noises or white noise machines. We're going way more analog than that. Tonight you discover a small, curious device resting on your side table, a Victorian sleep harmonicon. It's shaped like a music box but doesn't play a tune. Instead it hums. Literally. You wind it up and it produces a soft, constant drone, something between a whisper and the distant echo of a cello. Apparently Victorians believed that low, repetitive vibrations could calm the brain. And honestly, it's kind of working. Sound in the 19th century wasn't just entertainment, it was medicine. And not just any sound. Tuned, deliberate, soothing sound. Let's talk about musical cures and the slightly odd idea of harmonic healing. One particularly fashionable theory, popular in mid-century salons, was that certain musical notes corresponded to specific organs in the body. A high C might stimulate the liver, a low F, the stomach. The theory had exactly zero scientific backing, but that didn't stop people from hiring personal violinists to stand at the foot of their bed and play for their spleens. You, thankfully, do not have a spleen-specific concerto scheduled, but there is a small gramophone in the corner, and beside it a stack of records labeled Soothing Waltzes for Nervous Gentlefolk, Midnight Etudes in the Minor Key, Dr. Penworthy's Sleep, Improving Sonatas. You choose the sonatas. Because why not? As the needle drops, soft piano notes fill the room, blending with the whispery hum of the harmonicon. Your breathing slows. Turns out, Victorian soundscapes were an actual thing. Some physicians advised patients to create soothing environmental conditions. A polite way of saying open the window, listen to wind. They even built soundproof sleep chambers in upper-class homes, which included extra thick curtains, felt-lined walls, and rugs specifically designed to muffle footsteps. This wasn't just about luxury. It was believed that sudden noises could shock the nervous system and cause insomnia, madness, or even hysteria. You're starting to see a pattern in what Victorians blamed on hysteria. The bar was low, very low. Now back to you. You try replicating the effect by tossing an extra blanket over your window and stuffing a sock under the door to block out the draft. The room gets quieter, cozy, enclosed, like a velvet cocoon. It helps. But it turns out there was one more very weird Victorian sleep sound trend: animal noises. Yes, truly. Some books recommended letting a small dog or cat sleep in the room. Not for emotional comfort, but for the rhythmic sound of breathing. There were even reports of people renting animals for this exact purpose. One particularly eccentric lady reportedly paid to have a goat sleep in her bedroom for a week because its snores reminded her of the sea. And we're not sure what kind of goat she met. But sure, you consider this. A goat might be a little much, but maybe a sleepy cat would be nice. Victorian sleep advice often emphasized the companionship effect. Basically, the soothing presence of another living creature. Even if that creature is just licking its own foot at 3 a.m. Still, maybe you're not ready to share your bed with a farm animal just yet. Instead, you dig into your drawer and pull out a small device labeled a stereoscope sleep slides. Ah yes, the Victorian version of guided meditation. These were hand-held viewers into which you could insert illustrated slides of peaceful countryside scenes, moonlit gardens, or pastoral landscapes. The idea was simple: give the mind something pleasant and neutral to focus on. A little like counting sheep, but with 3D technology. You slot in a slide and peer through the lenses. A quiet village square, a water wheel turning, a baker sweeping his doorway. The image is so charmingly mundane it's perfect. Your mind wanders off, creating a story for each figure. You're walking those cobblestones now. You're the baker, you're the wheel. And just like that, you understand something important about Victorian insomnia. It wasn't always about falling asleep. It was about making peace with the time before sleep. That hazy, flickering in between space where dreams start to form and thoughts slow down to the pace of a carriage ride. Of course, Victorians didn't have TikTok or office Slack messages to ignore. Their minds wandered in candlelight, not blue light. But they still struggled. They still worried. They still longed for rest. And they tried in their own strange and earnest ways to soothe themselves. Which brings us to the final, and perhaps most unintentionally charming, of all 19th century sleep sound trends: reading aloud to yourself. Or, in many cases, having someone else read to you. Families often took turns reading chapters from long-winded, gently moralizing novels out loud before bed. And for those who lived alone, there were special phonograph cylinders, containing soothing voices, early audiobooks, essentially. The first recordings were often scripture, poetry, or dull agricultural reports. Apparently, crop rotation statistics made excellent sleep aids. You press your ear to the gramophone, the record whispers. In the year 1853, the turnip yield across East Sussex improved by approximately 12% over the previous season, due in part to the experimental use of horse compost. Honestly, you could listen to this forever. You smile just a little, and finally, your eyelids start to sink again. Let the harmonicon hum. Let the turnips thrive. Let the slow rhythm of invented comfort carry you towards something resembling peace. You're not alone in this. Not now. Not 150 years ago. Sleep, even when elusive, is a story we keep telling ourselves. And you're already drifting. You wake up at, actually, you don't know what time it is. It could be dawn. It could be 3:47 a.m. The moon looks like it's half asleep, too. A gentle chill wraps around your feet, and a creak from the hallway reminds you you're still here, still in the Victorian age, still chasing sleep like it's hiding under a ruffled pillow. And now it's time to try something a bit more energetic. Welcome to the strange, slightly sweaty, and surprisingly hopeful world of Victorian insomnia exercises. No, this doesn't mean jumping jacks in a corset, though honestly, someone probably tried that. You find an old booklet tucked into your drawer titled Movements for the Nervous Sleeper, Gentle Calisthenics and the Science of Rest. Chapter 1 is lovingly titled Wrist Circles and the Banishing of Night Demons. Promising. Victorians believed in something called muscle fatigue theory. The logic was simple: if your body is tired, your brain will surrender. Makes sense, kind of. In practice, though, things got weird fast. You stand in front of your wash basin and begin the first exercise at slow, deliberate arm lifts, holding a candle in each hand. Supposedly this mimics the natural sway of a sleepy willow tree. Or maybe it just makes you look like you're about to summon a ghost. Next up, toe pointing while reciting gentle affirmations, like, "My mind is a calm garden. No nocturnal thoughts shall trespass here. Sleep is but a physical agreement between me and gravity." You actually giggle a little. This is ridiculous. But you're not alone. Victorian health manuals were full of these rituals. Sleep dances, some called them. Mostly slow-motion stretches combined with breathing exercises and faintly poetic mantras. One popular figure in this field was Dr. Algernon Scroop, a sleep doctor who claimed that poor rest came from inward congestion of the intellect, which sounds a lot like today's overthinking. His solution: 12 minutes of controlled movement before bed. These included shadow fencing with an invisible opponent named Mr. Dot, kneeling with one hand on your heart and one on your stomach, slow motion blinking. Yes, that was a real thing. Calcular surrender. Naturally, you try it all. The fencing part is a little awkward in a room with antique furniture. You nearly knock over a vase that may or may not be holding dried lavender. Miss Dot puts up a good fight. Eventually, you collapse onto your bed again, limbs lightly buzzing, heart rate steady. But there's another side to this: sleepy walking. No, not sleepwalking, sleepy walking. Victorians sometimes encouraged a brief stroll before bed, even just around the parlor or courtyard. The idea was to gently dislodge the day's worries from your brain by letting your body move without urgency. You wrap a shawl around your shoulders and step into your imaginary Victorian garden. Gravel crunches beneath your feet. You walk slowly past rose bushes and doomed statues of Greek philosophers who also, presumably, suffered insomnia. You pause near a sundial that doesn't work at night. Fitting. Here you think about how much of this isn't about curing anything. It's about ritual, rhythm, repetition, reassurance. It's not that exercises solved insomnia. It's that they gave it a shape, a script, a sense of progress, however slow. And there's beauty in that, even if you still feel like a human cinnamon roll spiraled in your bedsheets. Let's not forget one of the most ambitious forms of Victorian body-based sleep therapy: the oscillating bed. Yes, it's exactly what it sounds like. Imagine a mattress mounted on a gentle rocking mechanism, like an adult cradle. Some were powered by foot pedals, others by slow-turning gears connected to the wall. The theory: babies fell asleep from rocking, so could adults. There are recorded cases of wealthy Victorians hiring footmen to manually rock their beds for up to an hour each night. It's unclear what the footmen thought of this. Probably not much. Sir Lionel Whisbery, surlaimed to have built a steam-powered dream platform, which vibrated the bed very gently at night. His house caught fire twice, but he reportedly slept like a log. You try to replicate the effect. You rock yourself very slightly. It doesn't feel like much. But your mind somehow lets go a little. Finally, you lie back and experiment with a strange little routine found scribbled in the back of the booklet. Bend the knees, wiggle the toes, tap the fingers, breathe through the nose. Picture a cow, picture a sheep, let go of counting, let go, sleep. It's not exactly Shakespeare, but it works. You chuckle. Whisper the poem again, softer this time, then softer still. Maybe there's no right way to exercise your way into sleep, but there's a certain magic in trying weird things with full commitment. Victorians were deeply good at that, and maybe, just maybe, you are too. You're pretty sure you've now done everything short of summoning a sleep fairy. But there's still one more path to explore: the mystical, the magnetic, the downright mesmerizing world of Victorian sleep gadgets. Welcome to the unofficial basement of the era's collective imagination, where science, superstition, and straight-up guesswork combine to create some of the most bizarre sleep devices humanity has ever known. You slide open a velvet-lined drawer and inside lies something that looks like a cross between a metronome and a mechanical crab. It's labeled, the Nocturnal Harmonizer, for nervous temperaments. No instructions, just hope. Victorians loved the idea of mechanical solutions for mental problems. The belief was simple: if you could measure it, you could manage it. And sleep, that was just a kind of silence waiting to be engineered. Your journey through the gadgetry of sleep begins with one of the most famous and frankly strange creations, the electropathic belt. This device, worn around the waist or head, claimed to stimulate internal currents and calm frayed nerves. In other words, it delivered gentle electric shocks in the hope of persuading your brain to shut up. The experience, historical accounts say, was somewhere between a static zap and hugging a mildly annoyed jellyfish. Some people claimed miraculous results. Others, understandably, chose to go without. Next up, tucked inside a silk-lined trunk, you find a small, handheld wind-up fan labeled Sleep Inducer Travel Edition. This was based on the idea that repetitive noise, like a soft whir, could soothe an overstimulated Victorian brain. A little ancestor of the modern white noise machine, you wind it up, the fan hums. You feel oddly comforted. Some Victorian homes even had custom-made sleep chambers, rooms that could simulate silence by layering thick carpets and even padded walls. Not for punishment, just for peace. These rooms were sometimes called cush cabinets. Imagine falling asleep in what basically amounts to a beautifully furnished soundproof closet. Cozy or claustrophobic, depends on how loud your neighbors are. But perhaps the strangest device of all is the sleep compass. Not a compass that points north. Oh no, this was a flat disc inscribed with moon phases, magnetic fields, and a dial in the center that claimed to align the sleeper with Earth's slumbering frequencies. How did it work? No one knows. Even then, no one knew. But placing it under your pillow was said to, you gently redirect dream energies. You find one under your mattress. It buzzes faintly. Could be electricity. Could be haunted. Hard to say. There were also aromatic diffusers shaped like miniature organs, designed to pump out lavender-scented steam as you dozed. You light one. It hisses gently, making your room smell like a botanical daydream. Oh, and don't forget the weighted sleep bonnet. Yes, weighted. On your head. This contraption was meant to simulate the comforting pressure of a parent's hand and looked suspiciously like a Victorian colander filled with sand. It promised drowsy pressure most delightful and mental stillness through cranial assurance. You try it. It slips over your ears like a slightly judgmental helmet. You feel ridiculous, but also kind of safe. And then there's the dream lamp. Slowly dimming oil lantern designed to fade over 30 minutes, so that you descend into sleep as the world dims with you. It's surprisingly poetic. You light it and watch the flame slowly dance, then shrink. Your room gets sleepier by the second. One final item catches your eye at a music box labeled, The Midnight Whisperer. It only plays one song, a slow, lilting tune designed to mimic the rhythm of relaxed breathing. If you listen closely, you can even hear soft-spoken affirmations, recorded using the phonograph technology of the day. Rest now. There's nothing to solve. It's soothing, and eerie, and beautiful. You're struck by how hopeful all these gadgets are. They may not have worked, but they carried with them a sense of possibility. The idea that rest is a thing worth designing for, worth chasing, worth building devices to catch. Historians today debate how effective these tools really were. Some say they were placebos. Others argue that the ritual of using them The attention, the gentleness, the pause, might have been more powerful than the mechanics themselves. And maybe that's the point. You don't need a perfect gadget. You just need a reason to believe that sleep is coming, that it's waiting for you just beyond the edge of the candlelight. So you put on the bonnet, wind the fan, whisper to the compass, and you let go. You've given up on machines. Or rather, they've gently failed you in ways that are charming but ultimately ineffective. So now, in the soft hush of the late Victorian night, you find yourself returning to the oldest comfort of all, food. Yes, tonight's chapter is about how the Victorians ate their way to slumber. And trust me, some of it is going to sound questionable. You start in a kitchen warmed by a slowly burning stove, where a teapot hisses just loud enough to let you know it's working. A plate of milk toast sits nearby. One of the era's go-to-sleep snacks. It's exactly what it sounds like, slightly stale bread, soaked in warm milk, and sometimes topped with a whisper of cinnamon. It's bland, but soothing, like if a hug became food. Victorians believed that blandness, restfulness, and any food that didn't excite the stomach or provoke the nervous was considered bedtime appropriate. This led to an entire category of sleep-inducing suppers, most of which would be politely rejected by modern foodies. One popular favorite, boiled lettuce water.
Yep.
Some recipe books suggested steeping romaine leaves like tea, then drinking the pale green liquid while reclining in a dark room. The idea: lettuce contains lactucarium, a mild sedative compound. Modern science says yes, but barely. Still, it was the ritual that mattered. Another contender was arrowroot pudding, made from a starchy tropical root and baked with milk and nutmeg. It looked like flan that forgot its personality, but was prized for being non-agitating, which is a very Victorian way of saying, so boring it puts you to sleep. You try a spoonful. It's soft, slightly sweet, inoffensive to all senses. Success. But not all bedtime foods were gentle. Some Victorians swore by beef tea. That's right, beef, boiled until its essence dissolved into a thin broth, then sipped like an elixir of strength and calm. You might call it protein tea. Others just called it dinner. To be fair, beef tea was thought to nourish the nerves, a favorite idea of Victorian physicians who loved assigning emotional and psychological properties to food. And then there were the nerve tonics, disguised as drinks. One advertisement promised a syrup of wild cherry bark and kola nut that would calm the mind for sleep. It also happened to contain alcohol, caffeine, and morphine. So yes, it probably did help people pass out, just not sustainably. Interestingly, some families developed entire pre-sleep kitchen routines. Mini rituals of brewing, warming, slicing, and stirring. Warm milk with cinnamon. Oats cooked down to near liquid form. Biscuits just soft enough to melt without chewing. And the rules were oddly strict: no cheese. It was said to awaken the mind. No tomatoes, too fiery. Definitely no onions. They were blamed for night terrors, especially in children. Instead, bedtime was for soft, pale foods. Food that could disappear without effort. Food that whispered. Now here's a twist: in wealthier homes, servants might prepare and deliver sleep trays late in the evening, complete with a candle, a warm napkin, and perhaps a note reminding the lady of the house to take her cordial. You're not quite sure what's in the cordial, but it smells like herbs and regret. In poorer homes, the effort might just be a cup of barley water, grains boiled until the water turned milky. It was cheap, filling, slightly viscous, and somehow comforting. But here's the most bizarre concoction of all: snail water. Yes, you read that right. A once popular folk remedy made by simmering snails, and sometimes slugs in milk, often with herbs like valerian or mint. It was believed to soothe the inflammatory humors and soften internal tension. You stare into the milky swirl. It stares back. You pass. Modern historians are divided on whether these foods actually helped or simply became socially acceptable bedtime placebos. The consensus: a little of both. The body might not need warm oat gruel to sleep, but the brain loves a signal that says, it's time to wind down. And that's what this whole sleepy menu really was. Signals. Signals to the mind and body: you've done enough, you're safe, you can stop. A warm drink, a soft texture, a flavor that barely announces itself. These were edible lullabies. So you pick up the milk toast, take a small bite, and as it dissolves in your mouth, you feel quiet. Because in the end, maybe sleep isn't about forcing yourself into rest. Maybe it's about slowly convincing your body it's allowed to let go, with or without the snails. At this point, you've sampled the tonics, the teas, the mildly disturbing gadgets. You've eaten foods so gentle they barely counted as eating. But now, you step into the more elusive side of Victorian sleep culture, the world of rituals and bedtime superstitions. Because when all else failed, people turned to habits, to charms, to patterns that gave the illusion of control over something as wild and unknowable as falling asleep. Tonight, you light a single candle, just as Victorians might have done, and prepare to meet their collection of bedtime beliefs that were less scientific method and more wishful thinking enlaced. First up, bed positioning. There was a firm belief in the 1800s that which direction your bed faced could determine the quality of your sleep. North to south was thought to align with the Earth's magnetic pull and thus calm the blood. East-west, risky, said to stir dreams or even summon restlessness. You look at your bed, it's currently diagonal. No wonder you've been feeling weird. Some households took this further, choosing special bed linen sewn with protective symbols. Not quite religious, not quite folk magic, but definitely a blend. Tiny embroidered crosses, stars, or just ZZ shapes stitched onto the inside of pillowcases to encourage restful dreaming. And then there were the rituals around hair. Victorian wisdom warned against going to sleep with unbrushed hair, especially for women. Tangled hair was thought to catch spirits, or at the very least, you invite fragmented dreaming, so nightly brushing wasn't just hygiene, it was protection. Some even braided small herbs into hair ribbons. Lavender, sage, rosemary. You find one under your pillow now, faintly scented and fraying at the edges. You breathe in. It smells like a garden trying to whisper a lullaby. Perhaps the most delightfully odd custom, shoes by the bed. According to some folk traditions, placing your shoes toe to pointed toward the door helped guide your dreams out safely in the morning. The logic. Dreaming was a form of astral wandering, and your shoes helped walk your spirit back. Others swore by flipping one shoe upside down to turn away nightmares. You try both methods, just to be safe. Another ritual involved placing a glass of water by the bed but not to drink. This was supposed to trap negative thoughts as they left your body in sleep. Some added a pinch of salt, believing it grounded the room's energy. Historians still debate whether this practice came from older magical traditions or was simply an excuse not to fetch fresh water in the middle of the night. Then there were pre-sleep phrases passed down from mother to daughter, whispered like tiny spells. One popular bedtime charm went like this: close my eyes and quiet my head, let no shadow share my bed. Dreams be gentle, rest be deep, now I lay me down to sleep. You say it out loud, half to yourself, half to the quiet air. It feels silly, but also oddly reassuring. Some households had bedtime objects, sleep dolls, or night stones. Small talismans placed under pillows to absorb anxiety or ward off roaming thoughts. These weren't toys or crystals, just small, cool things you could touch when you couldn't sleep. You find a smooth river rock under your pillow. Flat. Worn. Someone must have held this through many sleepless nights. One curious superstition warned against folding your clothes too neatly at night. It was said to trap the day's worries in your garments. Instead, people were encouraged to drape them gently over a chair, allowing the mind of the fabric to air out. You're not sure your shirt has a mind, but you drape it anyway. Perhaps the most surprising discovery. Some believed that reciting lists backwards, like names of your family or steps of your daily routine, could confuse your conscious mind and lull it into rest. You tried. Brushed teeth. Turned off lamp. Found rocket toast. Rid page. Lit candle. Your brain pauses, then yawns. Many of these rituals straddled the line between superstition and simple mindfulness. Modern historians can't quite agree. Were they magical thinking, or just a way to slow down? But maybe that's missing the point. When your life is full of unpredictable stress, whether you're a Victorian parent worried about cholera or a modern person drowning in emails, a little bedtime ritual gives you something to hold on to. A repeatable act that says this is the end of the day. No more noise, no more performance, just you, your breath, and a soft space to let it all go. So you line up your shoes, smooth the covers, whisper a rhyme, and as the candle gutters into shadow, you close your eyes. Not out of desperation, but out of readiness. Not because you're forcing sleep, but because you've invited it in. You've journeyed through the foods and emotions of Victorian sleep rituals. But there's one last corner of this oddly fascinating world that we've barely touched on yet, the scientific side. Or, more accurately, the pseudo-scientific side. You settle back into your bed, perhaps by now a little wary but curious. The world of Victorian sleep is as odd as it is persistent, and tonight, you're about to find out how their experiments in sleep were, let's just say, not always what we'd consider reliable. In the 19th century, the field of sleep science was a pretty wild frontier. No one truly understood what was happening when we shut our eyes, and sleep specialists were often just regular doctors experimenting with a mix of guesswork, folklore, and, on rare occasion, genuine scientific curiosity. But here's the kicker. While they didn't have the tools we do today, they were all kinds of inventive. Electricity was just beginning to be understood, and people were fascinated by its effects on the human body. Imagine, for a second, a Victorian sleep doctor sitting in their study, playing with early electric currents like some kind of mad scientist, thinking, what if electricity can zap the nervous system into rest? This led to a somewhat famous sleep experiment of the time: electrical sleep treatments. These early methods were based on the belief that mild electric shocks to the head or body could calm the nerves and prepare a person for rest. Doctors attached primitive electrodes to patients, sending low-voltage currents through their bodies, hoping to induce relaxation. The results? Mixed. The success rate was debatable at best, and many patients claimed that while the treatment did help them feel sleepy, it also left them slightly jittery and prone to unpredictable dreams. As you lay back, trying to wrap your head around this, you can't help but chuckle at the thought of someone shocking themselves to sleep. Though, come to think of it, you've probably been more desperate for sleep at times when you might have considered it. In another corner of the sleep science universe, hypnosis was also gaining traction. It was seen as a cure, all for anything from anxiety to chronic insomnia. Victorian doctors believed that hypnotism could not only make you fall asleep, but also unearth suppressed memories or cure your phobias. People would gather in rooms dimly lit by candles, eyes fluttering as a hypnotist would murmur softly, suggesting deep, peaceful sleep. The imagery of the hypnotist swinging a pocket watch back and forth, his voice lowering and deepening like a lullaby, became iconic. In one bizarre example, a Victorian sleep doctor wrote about his belief that the sleeping brain could actually be accessed through special chants or rhythms. He prescribed sleep inductions that involved standing in a circle, holding hands, and chanting certain words. They were meant to sync the group's brainwaves, as if sleep were a community experience. Unfortunately, these sessions often ended in more confusion than tranquility, with participants feeling more baffled than well-rested. Still, the notion that sleep could be a communal or collective experience persisted. But perhaps the oddest of all the treatments was the sleep chair. Picture it, a chair with strange mechanical contraptions designed to tilt you into a specific position for the best night's sleep. These chairs were said to work by aligning your body's pressure points while also, supposedly, calming your nervous system. While some swore by them, claiming they woke up with fewer aches and pains, most people found that after a night in the chair, they felt stiff, rather than refreshed. But no matter. Each new contraption was a sign of the Victorians' relentless pursuit to control the sleep cycle with whatever means they could. At this point, you can't help but wonder, did any of this actually work? Modern experts would say the odds are slim. After all, sleep is still an area of mystery for science, and even today, we struggle to understand all its nuances. But what's clear is this: the Victorians' approach to sleep was as much about experimentation as it was about ritual. They may have lacked our sleep gadgets or understanding of circadian rhythms, but their curiosity and belief that anything could be cured with a little effort, a little science, and perhaps a pinch of magic is something we can still admire. So now, as you lie in your bed, thinking about all the electric currents, snails, and journals of virtue, one thing seems clear: you're probably better off just turning off the lights and breathing deeply. The Victorian world of sleep might have been odd, complicated, and a bit of a guessing game, but maybe it wasn't all that different from your own pursuit of rest. You pull the covers up, and just like they did, you tell yourself, tomorrow will be a better day. But for tonight, rest is already here.